15 disgusting female classic country stars you were tricked into liking. You were sold sparkle, sequins, and a smile. You were told these icons were flawless angels in rhinestones, perfect role models beamed from the Opry stage to living rooms everywhere. But the grand trick of classic country has always been the packaging. We got fairy tales, not full humans, and the gap between those two is where the real story lives. Today, we're pulling the curtain with a little sass and a lot of receipts-free common sense, because a polished myth can be just as messy as any tabloid. Call it shocking if you want, but what you're about to hear is simple. The image you loved wasn't the woman, it was the sales pitch. We're not dragging legends, we're decoding them. Each mini-story is a reveal of how branding, timing, and cold-blooded business shaped the personas you thought you knew. And yes, some of these turns might sting, because once you notice the tricks, you can't unsee them. Ready to see the glitter without the smoke? Let's go. Dolly Parton arrived packaged as a backwoods Barbie, all big hair and bigger sweetness, a glittering halo of folksy charm that made every joke feel like a hug. That's the story you were fed. The reveal is sharper than any acrylic nail. Dolly is one of the most precise operators in the modern music business. She kept the pen, guarded the publishing, and built a universe with her name stamped on the front gate. Theme parks, libraries, literacy programs, hit shows, legacy catalogs. This wasn't luck. She let the world think the wardrobe did the talking while she negotiated like a hawk in pearls. Call it exposed or revealed, but the real twist is how the so-called caricature shielded the strategist. You were tricked into liking a cartoon. You ended up funding an empire. But that wasn't the whole story. She understood that kindness on camera could coexist with iron rules in the paperwork, and that the sweetest voice in the room can also be the most demanding when rights are at stake. If you missed the power because the laugh line landed first, that's proof the mask worked exactly as designed. It's not sin, it's strategy, and watching it click into place is oddly satisfying. Tammy Wynette was sold as the poster saint of devotion, the woman who told a nation to stand by your man and smiled through the storm. That tidy image hid a complicated architect of her own narrative, a performer shaped by label-era marketing and her own willpower. Her voice carried heartbreak, sure, but behind those records lived negotiations, image pivots, and choices tailored to keep a career burning hot in a world that punished women for aging a day. The shock isn't scandal, it's autonomy. Tammy wasn't just the song, she was the selector, the survivor, the planner. The machine sold simplicity, the woman ran complexity. And once you see that, you hear every chorus differently, and what happened next would make radio blush. Labels leaned hard on an image that printed money, but Tammy kept steering the wheel back toward material that matched the woman she actually was in that moment. She wasn't a porcelain figure standing quietly in a window. She was a business owner, navigating glare, gossip, and deadlines, picking battles and tempos with instinct sharpened by survival. That nuance rarely fits on a bumper sticker, which is why the myth sticks and the truth slips by. Loretta Lynn floated in as the coal miner's daughter, all innocence and apron strings, but her pen kept slipping dynamite into the jukebox. Songs about the pill, marriage politics, and a wife's right to speak her mind weren't accidents. They were deliberate shocks aimed straight at the gatekeepers. Radio literally banned her, and she kept pushing, because boundaries existed to be tested. If you thought the small-town halo was the product, the truth is the barricade breaker was the brand. The reveal isn't dirt. It's courage dressed in calico, a strategist who weaponized plain talk. You were sold nostalgia. You got a policy fight set to steal guitar. She didn't raise her voice so much as sharpen her subject matter, and every time a program director flinched, she gained another listener who felt seen. The outrage looked theatrical from a distance. Up close, it was a ledger of who gets to speak. Loretta's trick was simple. Make the chorus catchy enough that even your critic hums it on the way home. Patsy Cline wore the halo of America's sweetheart, but the studio darling could also be a contract killer of bad deals. Before it was fashionable, she demanded better pay, proper billing, and respect for the work, setting a blueprint that others quietly followed. The myth says she floated through hits like a dream. The reveal says she counted zeros and called shots. Her velvet phrasing charmed the public. Her steel spine educated the suits. If that shatters the fantasy, good. The real woman was better than the poster. And when the poster falls, you finally see the blueprint underneath. She set precedents others quietly cashed, proving that a velvet glove can still sign a hard contract. Mentorship and muscle coexisted. She could put an arm around a newcomer and still walk into a meeting determined to rewrite the terms. If that spoils the innocent story, it replaces it with agency, which is a far better soundtrack for a legend. Reba McEntire looked like the girl next door who borrowed your casserole dish and returned it with thank you ribbon. Behind that friendly grin lived a brand architect with ruthless operational excellence, scaling across television, fashion, arenas, and decades of touring. She made diversification look like a wink and a laugh, turning red hair into red letter margins. The sweet small-town persona was marketing, the empire was math. Every costume change hid a spreadsheet. Every charming anecdote framed a product line. It wasn't deception, it was design. And if you think that's bold, wait for the teen tornado who refused to spin out. The sitcom smile and arena patter kept audiences relaxed while the machinery behind the curtain stacked touring routes, brand tie-ins, and calendar discipline with clockmaker care. Her greatest illusion was making scale feel intimate, selling 10,000-seat nights as neighborly gatherings. When charm becomes a system, you stop calling it luck and start calling it leadership. Tanya Tucker arrived as a teen rebel whirlwind, a tabloid magnet with a rasp that cut glass, but the industry machinery supercharged that image on purpose. Behind the headlines stood a pro who kept reinventing, refusing to be trapped by yesterday's storyline. She survived cycles that would have flattened a dozen peers, turning spectacle into longevity. The trick wasn't that you liked a rebel, it's that you missed the discipline. Hooks and headlines made the noise, craft made the career, and when the dust settled, the spotlight still found her center stage. Reinvention takes rehearsal, and behind every headline there was a room where musicians and managers counted beats, budgets, and breath. She let the public guess about chaos while she quietly indexed endurance, coming back again and again with a sharpened sound. Call it comeback if you like. Professionals call it continuity. Shania Twain was pitched as Nashville's ingenue, but the real play was pop country strategy executed with the precision of a touring general. Co-writing, co-producing, and engineering videos that turned arenas into cathedrals, she reshaped radio lanes and taught the world that twang could wear glitter boots and stomp into every continent. This wasn't an accident or a lucky break, it was architecture. If the industry pretended she was merely the face, the reveal says she was also the blueprint and the hard hat. Crossover wasn't a mood, it was a plan. And when a plan hits, it looks like destiny. Which brings us to a duo whose picture-perfect harmonies hid boardroom storms you were never meant to hear. She didn't so much break rules as rewrite formatting in plain view, turning a regional dialect into a global dialect without asking permission. The videos told cohesive stories, the tours delivered spectacle, and beneath it all, the publishing stance stayed disciplined. After a quiet season, she returned like a comet, reminding everyone that momentum is a skill you can relearn. The Judds, Naomi and Winana, were sold as an unbreakable mother-daughter miracle, two voices braided into one warm rope of harmony. But behind those pristine photos lived complex partnership math, health struggles, heavy schedules, and business choices that don't fit on a postcard. The image promised ease. Real life delivered negotiations and boundaries, and the kind of love that sometimes needs distance to survive. If that sounds messy, it's human. The reveal isn't scandal, it's honesty in a marketplace that rewards fairy tales. They gave you magic on stage while managing storms off stage. Perfection was the ad copy, endurance was the truth. Family bands make gorgeous posters, but families are systems with moving parts, and those parts sometimes grind. They protected the harmonies by being realistic about the humans, which might be the most radical thing a brand can do. If you heard only sweetness, you missed the boundaries that allowed the sweetness to survive long enough to matter. Faith Hill floated in on a small-town Cinderella cloud, but the glass slipper was custom-ordered and overnighted with intent. Song selection, visual strategy, and television placements were lined up like dominoes, each fall triggering the next wave of mass appeal. You saw effortless grace. The team saw market segmentation. It's not a takedown to say the fairy tale was scheduled, it's a compliment to the logistics. The reveal is meticulous crossover planning disguised as fate. Her catalog feels effortless in hindsight because the map was drafted before cameras rolled, with lighting, wardrobe, and storytelling calibrated to flatter the arc of a crossover. The lesson isn't that it was fake. It's that excellence can look like magic when planning and talent shake hands. She didn't stumble into bigger rooms. She reserved them. Martina McBride carried a soccer mom soprano that felt safe until she aimed it at a powder keg and lit the fuse with Independence Day. That move pushed heavy themes straight through mainstream radio while still sounding like Saturday afternoon family errands. It was gutsy packaging, a stadium-sized plea wrapped in PTA-friendly melody. The sell was comfort, the reveal was risk. If you were tricked, it was by the sheer elegance of the delivery, the way a well-cut melody can hide a steel-toed message. Speaking of polish, let's talk about the multitasking maestro who turned sponsorships into symphonies. The genius was placement. Put a hard truth in a melody so pretty that daytime radio forgets to flinch until the bridge. She made courage sound familiar, which is how difficult conversations sneak into minivans and office cubicles. That's not trickery. That's craft that respects the audience enough to challenge it. Barbara Mandrell looked like variety show sparkle personified, a whirl of gowns, smiles, and camera-ready charm. Underneath lived a virtuoso and a touring workhorse who could pick up instruments like they were souvenirs and make each one sing. She blended television synergy with sponsorship savvy long before brand partnerships became everyone's side hustle. The trick wasn't the tassels, it was the timing. Her polish was a delivery system for relentless discipline. She could read a crowd like a ledger, balancing surprise and satisfaction until the applause behaved like compound interest. Sponsorship logos weren't sellouts. They were fuel lines feeding a road operation that demanded stamina and spreadsheets. When someone smiles that confidently on camera, chances are they've already solved 3 problems you never saw. Kitty Wells was packaged as a quiet homemaker with a guitar, but when Honky Tonk Angels hit, it flipped the moral script with a single turn of phrase. Suddenly, the airwaves had to make room for a woman pushing back, and the gate swung just wide enough for others to march through. The branding said gentle, the record said not so fast. That paradox is the point. You were coaxed in by calm, then confronted by clarity. It wasn't outrage for its own sake, it was a reset of the conversation. That one song did not politely ask for space, it took it, and in taking it, rearranged the furniture for every woman who followed. Sometimes the most explosive act wears the meekest face, because modesty disarms gatekeepers long enough to slip a manifesto through the door. That's not manipulation, it's artistry deployed with a strategist's patience. Emmylou Harris floated in with an angelic halo, but behind that glow stood a curator-in-chief building elite bands, bridging rock and country and steering long arc artistry on her own terms. She made purity sound radical, not because it was simple, but because it was selective. Every harmony felt effortless, every choice was meticulous. Her catalog reads like a conversation across genres, a series of invitations issued with kindness and a backbone. If you thought the angel lived on air, the reveal shows a producer of quiet revolutions, one arrangement at a time. Her great magic trick was refusing bloat. She trimmed projects to the parts that sang, surrounding herself with players who valued restraint over flash. Curation is power by another name, and she wielded it gently. which made it even more decisive. It turns out an angel can also be an editor with an iron spine. Crystal Gayle seemed like the soft-focus balladeer you play after midnight, all silky vowels and a cascade of hair that launched 1,000 posters. The real move was a strategic pivot from her sister's lane, a sleek pop-country hybrid engineered for adult contemporary conquest. She wasn't echoing anyone. She was drafting her own map and printing it on glossy paper. The radio dial didn't just accept her. It rearranged itself to make room. That's not an accident. That's intention-wearing perfume. She made adult contemporary not an afterthought, but a destination, committing to arrangements that honored clarity over clutter. The hair became a billboard, sure, but the records carried quiet swagger that still sneaks up on new listeners and refuses to age. When a pivot works, people call it fate. Insiders call it focus. LeAnn Womack gave the world I Hope You Dance, an eternal wedding playlist guarantee and the kind of song that becomes everyone's caption. But the reveal came later, when she took a hard left toward gritty Americana, choosing edge over autopilot and leaving some radio comfort in the rear view. That move wasn't a risk for the sake of drama. It was a recalibration toward artistry. The industry offered cushions. She picked a wooden stool and played anyway. You were sold forever soft. You got a sharp turn and a steadier compass. And now that we've toured the Hall of Mirrors, let's stitch the pattern together. The Americana turn didn't slam a door. It opened windows, letting air into rooms that had grown too perfumed by safety. Awards and charts come and go, but the satisfaction of alignment sticks. And you can hear that calm confidence in the grain of later vocals. Sometimes the bravest word a singer learns is no. Here's the truth pulsing beneath every rhinestone. Classic country sold you characters. The angel, the rebel, the sweetheart, the homemaker, the soft-focused dream, they're all costumes designed to travel well, from radio bumpers to magazine covers to tour posters taped above teenage beds. None of that is evil. It's marketing. The trick, and yes, it's a trick, is that the costume can become the story, and the story can eclipse the builder who made it. When you say you love Dolly, you may love the glitter and the giggle. The reveal is that you also love a mogul who rearranged the rules in heels. When you hum Tammy, you echo a strategist who fought to keep her narrative machine humming. When you bow to Loretta, you salute a woman who aimed controversy at the gate and kept walking even when the sign said closed. Patsy negotiated the worth of a voice people still copy. Reba turned charm into a supply chain. Tanya outran her press clippings with stubborn craft. Shania drafted a map that crossing guards now use to channel traffic. The Judds gave proof that harmony can coexist with hard boundaries. Faith showed that Cinderella stories are manufactured with precision. Martina proved a melody can carry a megaphone. Barbara monetized polish without losing sweat. Kitty reset the argument. Emmylou curated a museum and called it a tour. Crystal pivoted with elegance. LeAnn swerved on purpose. So were you tricked into liking them? Only if you confuse the ad with the artisan. The marketing promised sugar. The reality delivered steel. And that contrast is delicious because it means the legends are not fragile dolls. They're operators who outlasted a business designed to age them out. If the word disgusting in our title makes you grin or grit your teeth, remember it targets the illusion, not the woman. It's the way a manufactured halo can smother the human underneath until we forget to ask who wrote the checks, who owned the songs, who carried the risk, assistant. The reveal is that these so-called goddesses never needed rescuing. They needed room. Room to plan, room to pivot, room to fail in public and quietly rebuild, room to test an era's limits without apologizing for ambition or dialing down a vision so someone else could feel comfortable. You were sold perfection because perfection sells. But perfection is boring, and boring doesn't fill arenas for decades. What fills arenas is hunger, timing, and the nerve to keep asking for more. That's what ties these stories together. A shameless commitment to survival, to scale, to ownership, sometimes soft-spoken, sometimes loud enough to rattle a marquee. If you want a moral, take this one. Love the records, But don't forget the operators. Celebrate the lace, but admire the ledger. Applaud the sparkle, but track the strategy. Because the next time a label sells you a fairy tale, you'll hear the gearbox under the melody. You'll notice the paperwork behind the poster, and you'll spot the human hand that shaped the myth. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's not a loss of innocence. It's an upgrade from fan to analyst, from passive listener to active reader of the room. It makes the music richer because it reattaches the art to the person who paid for it with time, with choices, with guts. Maybe that's the final reveal. You weren't tricked into liking these stars. You were invited to like the mask. Now you get to meet the maker and decide which one deserves the louder applause.